Hey everyone, I'm Matt Lange. I'm going to be showing you my top 5 favorite plugins for both creativity as well as mixing tricks. My favorite plugin, basically ever, is also my favorite reverb ever. It's made by Eventide. It's called Black Hole. Let's just say I take this Rhodes piano, and it's just a chord. It's very simple. Pretty, it's simple. But even just dropping it on the channel and just using it basically as an insert, it just gives it a nice, beautiful lushness. So my next favorite plugin is the Neural DSP Archetype Pliny. Just an absolutely phenomenal sounding guitar amp simulator. And I love it for clean sound. Very like ethereal. Here's just a regular chord. It's really nice and clean. And just built into the chain, you have a compressor, which is a very clean compressor. It's got a really nice delay and a really nice reverb. So without any of this stuff, my bass clean sound, let's even take off the compressor. Really clean. Let's engage both the compressor, which now just fills out everything really nicely. It's clean. Add the delay. Let's even make wetter, more feedback. Really pretty. And now let's add our reverb to it. My number 3 favorite plugin, it's the Empirical Labs arouser. It's very distressor-esque. I have it basically on both a snare drum as well as my drum bus for acoustic drums. And these drums came from the Get Good Drums library. Here's the drums without any compression at all. Now I'm going to start with the snare, and I put it on the snare first, and it's crushing it pretty hard. But again, it sounds fantastic. So here's the snare without it. Here's with it. It just sounds a lot bigger. And one of the things I really like about the arouser in general, you have the saturation circuit in it. I'm also going to use it now also on the overall bus. Here's my bus without the compression. Here's with it. And I have it in parallel. There's a nice mix function here. But what I like about it, it just makes the drums just breathe off each other a little bit more. And I always liked it when you kind of get some pumping in the hi-hats. Of course, you've got all the various traditional Empirical Labs ratios like Rivet, which is essentially the nuke function on a distressor, which that's going to destroy the signal, just so you can hear it. Not parallel, we're totally going all in. Yeah, it just obliterates a signal in a very musical way. On drums, it's phenomenal. I use it on vocals all the time too, actually, because it's a very versatile compressor. Also in this track, I'm using it on my bass guitar. And this is a more traditional use of it, of course. And the bass is actually also going through the Archetype Pliny, just because that's what I decided to use, because it sounds great. But here is no compression. And here's with compression. And you can see I'm compressing it pretty hard. But now it's really bringing out that tail. Next up on my list of my top 5 favorite plugins is my favorite EQ. And that's Equilibrium by DMG Audio. It's incredibly powerful. It's probably the most surgical and versatile EQ I've ever used, and let's talk about why. So here I have it on our guitar pattern, and it's just cleaning up the low mids just a little bit. without it, there's a lot of mud in there. So I'm using it, in a pretty simple way. But what's great about it is every individual band, I can have a different kind of curve. So for instance, I could boost the high end. Let's take this node. Which I want more air to the sound, but now I'm going to change this band to, I want it to be the sound of an API 550, because I love the sound of the high end of a 550, and this is going to be the same curve as that. And I'm boosting it by 16 dB, which is an obscene amount, and if I take it off, then I miss it. It's not harsh at all. It's just beautiful. And sure, there is some upper mid-range issues here. So I can just easily scoop those out. And if I want it to be more analog-y, if you will, I could choose a different curve. And let's say I take 4KE black, which presumably would be an SSL console. And now, I mean, look at how the curve changes dramatically into a much more open Q. And we're ultimately going to have to tighten that because I don't want to, make this thing too anemic. But here's what it sounds like now. It's just a very, very musical sounding EQ, and it's so surgical. I mean, if you find resonances that you find really annoying, you can literally take the slimmest band ever, and you can notch that out, which is something I do all the time if I need to. But it's a great sounding EQ. I'm using it also on my overall guitar bus. And again, it's just doing a little bit more of, just taking out like a little bit more of the low mids, and then that frequency I really just took out earlier. It's doing a little bit in the bus also. I have another guitar here, and this is layered under it, and it's basically, it's a similar thing, it's a similar pattern, but it's reversed. And for this, I'm doing a much more dramatic EQ job because I want this thing just to sit behind the original guitar line, and I don't want it to actually interfere with it. But I want it to be super wide and super stereo, whereas the other is pretty in the center. So another thing I'm doing here is I'm taking out all of the lower mids, and I'm doing that with, again, the black version of an SSL. Without it, that's going to fight entirely with the other guitar part. And then once again, I'm boosting the high end with the 550 style high end. So now when I play it with the other guitar, they don't fight each other at all. It's just like the reversed part is kind of hugging the center of the main guitar line. And yeah, this EQ, I love it. It's very easy to use. It's extremely versatile, and it sounds fantastic. So that's why DMG Audio Equilibrium is my favorite EQ. Number 5 in my top 5 favorite plugins, this is Elevate by NewFangled Audio. Elevate is honestly the most incredible limiter I've ever used ever. It's got so much control. And so I'm going to show you 2 different ways I use it. The first is I just have it kind of on my master. I mean, this track is, of course, not mastered or anything like that. This is how I'm using it. But we're just going to take this section at the end, which is pretty full on. And here is without Elevate. With it. So it gets things loud, that's obvious, but let's talk about what it's actually doing and what makes it so cool. One of the things that makes this limiter so incredible is that it is not a single channel or single band limiter. I'm using the maximum of 26 bands, which means each of these 26 bands, and if we look, let's look at the filter bank. So this is going to show the frequencies. And these are all, it's under the melodic mode or mel spacing, and these are frequencies that were designed by NewFangled Audio to be particularly musical, but you can move the frequencies to be whatever you want, and you create your own multiband limiting. But I'm going to hit it, and you're going to see, especially in the low end, that's where you're going to see more variation. But each of these individual frequencies is all being limited at a slightly different amount. And you can see, for instance, like let's look at 102 right there. That's getting hit a little bit harder than, say, the stuff up at the top. And it's not that drastic because my mix happens to be pretty even. Imagine that. But it really just evens everything out really nicely. And on top of it, when this is where the other parts are going to be kind of fun, is there's a transient designer built in. And I always use a little bit on a mix because without it, it gets a little squashy. So let's turn the gain all the way back up. And then I'm going to show you the difference of the emphasis versus no emphasis. So here's no emphasis at all. It's really spiky at that point. And I wouldn't push it that hard on a mix itself. But once again, it's doing it across all 26 bands. So it's going to be actually applying that kind of transient design to each individual band, which is incredibly powerful. And so it has adaptive transient mode right here. And what that's going to mean is it's in single band. It's going to apply the same amount of transient design to every band. I had it at 50%, so it's not super hard. You put it at multi-band, and then all the various frequencies will be hit differently. And it's a really effective way to keep a lot of emphasis, a lot of punch, without really losing any level. For my taste, I tend to keep that around 50, and I tend to keep the amount of emphasis about 39%. But that's what I do. And there's also a clipping section, which I use all the time, but not on my master bus. And this is how I do it. So for instance, I used it actually to make this sub drop. And so I had this modular sub drop. I made it on the modular synth right behind me. It sounded like this, which sounds big, but I can make it a lot bigger. And I'm going to be doing that using only Elevate. This is where the drive comes into hand. So first, I'm driving the whole thing, and my input is 10 dB, which is a lot of gain. So without any drive, I mean, it literally shook my walls, which is a good thing in my eyes. But let's go to the drive section. And this is fun because not only can you do a lot of, you can clip it, but you can also actually change the curve of the clipping. So say I bring it up to, let's say 5 dB of clipping. It's a lot heavier. And I could actually change the clipping shape from, I'm a soft clipper right now. I can go hard, really drive it. And because that's going straight into the limiter, I'm not killing the signal. It's just really loud and really distorted. And that's really effective for this kind of impact. So if I back it off back to, say, I was doing 5 dB of gain or 5 dB of drive, let's just print it. My sub drop that already was pretty decent now is this absolute monster of a sub. And the way I used it in the track is I have it alternating basically with, well, it hits with a kick, but it hits underneath a kick. So I have a regular kick, and then this is right underneath it, and it sounds absolutely huge. And then I just cut it. But yeah, this is all just created with NewFangled Audio Elevate. And I use it all the time on snares, especially when I'm just designing percussion in general, where I really want to blow it out. And even on snaps, a great trick I found is take a stereo snap and just run it through this, drive it, clip it, and then you get such a wide, such in-your-face kind of snap sound that it would take a lot more work using really a chain of multiple plugins to be able to do what this does just honestly in seconds. So NewFangled Audio Elevate, it's the best limiter I've ever used, and I'm blown away by it. It's really incredible. Those are my top 5 plugins, and thanks for checking it out. If you want to see more of this, you can check out my course that I created with ProMix Academy, where I created this track entirely from scratch, and I'm using all these plugins and many more, and you'll get an insight into my production workflow, my thought process, and all the above. So the links for that are below in the description. Check it out if you want. And go have fun. Use some plugins. Everything in here, they're all made by fantastic people. So support these incredible developers and check out their work.